The prime ministers of Denmark and Greenland met today with the German Chancellor here in Berlin. Topping the agenda, the Trump administration's ongoing bid to purchase Greenland from Denmark. Now, last week, U.S. President Trump said that he had no intention of using force to acquire Greenland, but he still wants some form of control of the island. Now, that has been rejected by the Danish and Greenlandic leaders, Mette Frederiksen and Jens Frederik Nielsen. Well, today, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said that he supports both leaders, posting on social media, "Our European unity contributed to Greenland's negotiating success. Germany, as a NATO partner, will increase its commitment to security in the High North." And for more now, I'm joined by German Shapiro. He's a research director of the European Council on Foreign Relations. Jeremy, it's good to have you with us. You've been following the news as we have. Denmark's prime minister and the leader of Greenland were here in Berlin today seeking European backing after President Trump floated that idea of taking over Greenland. What does this moment tell us about the current state of U.S.-Europe relations?
It doesn't tell us great things. It tells us in the first instance that the President of the United States is more interested in his sort of imperial ambitions than he is in the value that come from a strong U.S.-European alliance. And he's willing to risk the enmity of a traditional ally like Denmark, as well as all the European countries that are supporting Denmark in this effort, in order to get his hands on Greenland territory, which, isn't really essential to anything. It's more of a sort of ego trip for the president. So I think it gives you, on one level, a sense of what is driving U.S. foreign policy these days, but also tells you that the U.S.-European alliance is not very valued by the president.
And Jeremy, we have to let that sink in for a moment. I mean, this would have been shocking to Europeans, just a few weeks ago, and now it almost seems normal.
Well, I would reject the idea that it is normal, although I understand that point of view. Donald Trump is the president of the United States, and so we have to take his views very seriously. He's even a very powerful president of the United States. But this is not normal U.S. Policy. This is not policy that has the support of the American public. It's not policy that has the support of the U.S. Congress. It is not the historic U.S. policy, and it is not even policy that seems very popular within Donald Trump's own administration, although none of his people will admit that. Mm-hmm. So I do think that this is not normal, but the president of the United States is not super normal, and the president of the United States is an incredibly powerful person that you have to pay serious attention to, and you have to take seriously. So that's where we are. This episode, this Greenland episode, how much would you say it is about the Arctic and U.S. national security versus America's changing approach to allies? I mean, what is the true story here? I don't think that it's about Arctic security at all. Arctic security is a genuine issue. There are genuine issues there to discuss, and they have been discussed a lot more as a result of President Trump bringing this up. But I think he has completely instrumentalized those issues. And the way that we know that is that from the very beginning of this crisis, from the very beginning of Donald Trump's second term in the last 12 months, Denmark has offered the president everything he asked for on Arctic security. They have been willing to do whatever it is that the United States wants. I want to play something, comments from the German defense minister from earlier today, and then we'll talk about it. Take a listen.
It's about acting together as NATO partners to ensure that we are not prepared to give up this area, because whoever controls it will ultimately control the link between America and Europe. And that is why it is of great military importance.
So, Jeremy, we've got the German defense minister there talking about NATO acting jointly together to protect the Arctic. I mean, he means in cooperation with the United States, but is that wishful thinking? I mean, hasn't Trump made it clear that he wants Greenland for the U.S. and the U.S. alone?
I think it's not wishful thinking in one regard, which is that NATO is capable of doing that, and NATO or the NATO partners could do that together, and the United States may end up participating in that. Although, frankly, even without the United States, it would be possible for NATO to do that. It is wishful thinking that will end the president's perspective on the problem, because, as I said, that is not what the president is actually after. The president is after extending the map of the United States and being able to say, as a sort of legacy issue, that he grew America, that he incorporated this territory, and that he's the best president that's ever been.
I know that you have argued that Europe holds more cards in Greenland than is often assumed. I mean, what would you say are the most undervalued, underappreciated sources of European leverage here?
Well, I think we've seen in the last week that there is a lot of European leverage on this issue. This was a crisis that was a little bit different than the earlier Donald Trump crises over the tariffs, the trade tariffs. Europe held together. Europe demonstrated that it was willing to retaliate against tariffs. Europe put together credible reprisal ideas, including the anti-coercion instrument. And those things had an effect inside the United States. Those things had an effect on U.S. domestic public opinion. They had an effect on U.S. markets, and they had an effect on the U.S. Congress. And all of those things came together to convince Donald Trump that this was not the right moment to push forward, and that he backed off at Davos last week, specifically because Europe showed not only that it had leverage, but that it had the unity and the capacity to deploy it in this case. So I think that there's important lessons to be learned here, particularly because this issue could easily come back in the coming months.
I want you to look ahead for a moment, if you can, before we run out of time. And let me ask you, does the Arctic risk becoming a new fault line in U.S.-Europe relations, similar to what we see with trade or with China? I mean, will we view the Arctic one day with as much trepidation as we view Beijing, for example?
No, I don't think that we will. And I think that the reason is that the Arctic is not what this crisis is about. This crisis is about Donald Trump's megalomania and his desire to expand the United States. Under a future president of either party, I think, it's very unlikely that the Arctic will be a subject of dispute between the U.S. and Europe. I couldn't say that about trade or China or any number of other U.S.-European issues, which are always points of friction and likely will be in the future. But the Arctic is not a traditional point of friction, and I don't think that it will be under a new president. The only real question is whether the alliance can sustain itself intact enough until that new president shows up.
Yeah, well, we've got 3 more years to get through first before we can begin to answer that question. Jeremy Shapiro
I forgot about that.
With the European Council on Foreign Relations. Jeremy, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.